Okay, we are live. We're live here on Warriors of Light Show. Yes, this is episode 25, and this is a solo cast. I've not done a solo cast in such a long time that I almost felt like I forgot how to do those. So I'm really excited to return to this, and I'm looking forward to doing more of these actually in the future as well, because I really enjoy sharing transmissions with you all. So this is episode 25. We are going to be looking into the inner union of masculine and the feminine energies. And this topic was actually requested by two different warriors, and I don't think they came together to suggest it, but I thought that it will be a perfect rounding of this season. We are left with 2 more episodes to go, and then this season will close for the year, right? And so one of the episodes that we had with Baba Buntu was on the masculine, and now we just need to like balance it a little bit by talking about the feminine energy, but also really the masculine energy as well. So I'm excited. Are you ready? Let's do this. This episode is particularly for us, the genetic path cutters, those of us who are like the healers, the shamans, the oracles, whether we're at the beginning of our journey or we're already practicing, and we are on the journey of a deeper union with ourselves, with the energies that we are, that we were created to be. Okay, so everything will be based on that, particularly because my own experience with being introduced to the masculine and the feminine energies was really when I started this work as a practitioner, as an oracle. That is when I started to really deeply understand masculine energies as well as feminine energies. So that's what we're going to be looking into. I actually have questions that the two warriors wanted me to particularly touch into, and so we're going to be looking at these questions. We've got 3 questions to answer, but feel free to put your own questions as well in the chat as we go along this transmission. Okay, so let's begin at the top. Okay, and we'll break it down and individualize it, come to these physical bodies that we are, right? So when we understand that within the universal laws, one of the most fundamental law of our universe is the law of gender, right? And this law of gender, its premise essentially is that there are 2 frequencies that exist in our planet or in our multiverse. And this is the frequency of the feminine and the frequency of the masculine. And our ancient ancestors, they tell the story of how, God was sitting in the beach, just chilling by himself or herself, all at once, basically in union with these energies. And when creation started to happen and trickle down to our planet, this separation that happened in these 2 forms, the form of masculine and the form of the feminine energy, right? And then we have been experiencing that down step, right? So there is higher energies that are the reflection of the masculine and the feminine, and the different traditions have different names for it, right? Why am I forgetting this? There are those who call this masculine energy, this original template of the masculine, Christ, right? And Christ, not necessarily just in the way that we know it, which is the CHRIST, but more of the KRYST, Christ, which is essentially the manifestation of a masculine frequency, right? The architecture of a masculine frequency. And then the frequency of the feminine, it's what they call Sophia, right? We have different names in the different cultures that we have, right? And Sophia is the frequency of the feminine. And so every while every fractal, every consciousness, every being, you are in the embodiment of these two energy, right? You are, if you are female with a physical female body, you are holding, majority of the female body is holding the Sophia energy, the feminine energy, the grandmother frequency, and the male body is holding the masculine energy. However, the degree of how much you are holding this is different with each person, right? So there are those who the masculine energy will be a lot more than the compared to other people, and the same is true for the feminine energy, right? So if we fundamentally understand that the origin of what we're talking about is essentially, we're talking about the law of gender, which is a functioning law in our universe, right? So the feminine embodies itself differently from the masculine, right? And you can think of it from your own perspective of how this looks like for you, right? The idea, and this is why we've had a bit of a trap with religion, the idea is that the masculine or the Christ, and I'm not talking about Jesus, I'm talking about this frequency, this divine masculine frequency. The Christ is the architect that is holding the light, that is the seed that comes up with the idea of creation, the idea of a world, right? And then the Sophia, the feminine, is the one that creates, that brings into manifestation the idea, right? And so these two energies, they are infinitely connected to each other. These are the original beloveds, right? These are the original twin flames, if you want, right? That one aspect of our creation, one aspect of the collective human race is uniquely able to come up with ideas, evolve how creation continues. And then the other is able to say, okay, you have an idea of this, okay, I will create it. I will be the one who gives birth to that idea, right? And so the reason why we've had like a little bit of like religious, this hierarchical idea that, for example, God is male, comes from this fundamental way in which the law of gender works out, which is that first comes the thought, the seed, the idea, and then the idea is manifested as through the feminine, right? But if you really look at it, it doesn't mean that the other one is better and superior. They just call creating together. You know, so that is the beginning of understanding the masculine energies and the feminine energies. And then when we look at what we call just human beings, right? We often come into this world through these two bodies, the female body and the masculine body, sorry, the male body. And in African spirituality, the first thing we often will ask you is to tell and mention where you come from, like the names of your ancestors from your mother's side and your father's side, right? Because fundamentally what makes us who we are, what we have manifested is essentially these two energy, the energy of your mother and the energy of your father. And that is why there is the belief that we are holding these two energies in some way, because we are created from our mother's energy and our father's energy. Although we have more of our mother's energy, mostly because we enter the world through our mother's energy. We inherit 60% of a lot of the mother energy, and then the 40% is contributed by the father. And when you go back to the idea, which I just shared, it makes sense, right? So that is the premise, that we are our mother's blood, we are our father's blood. And these two energies, these two frequencies, influence who we are today, right? So if you really, really want to begin your journey of who you are, you start with looking into your mother's life experiences and her family, and then you also do the same with your father. We do, in African spirituality, we do highlight, particularly looking into the father. And the reason why we do that, it's because the masculine energy is very much connected to the physical manifestation, while the feminine energies is very spiritual, right? So the way that we create babies, I think they've tried to write, like science has tried to really explain how women create babies, but when you really think about it, it's like a bit of magic. Like one time there's no baby and then there's a baby. So that's why we say like this, the feminine is connected to the spirit realm. It works within the laws of the spirit realm, while the masculine tends to work within the laws of the physical realms more. It's about the ideas, it's about what we can see, right? And so this is where we start. We start with what we can see for most people. So if you go to a shaman and oracle, they will ask you about the name of your grandfather, the name of your father's name and the family, and they will look into that, because what you often see as the physical expressions that you call your life is greatly influenced also by your father, right? The masculine energy influences, for example, our experiences with money. It influences our experiences with relationships, marriage, and so forth, work, our career as well. So that's why the father seems to be like important when we do divination, when we want to understand ourselves better, while the feminine deals a lot with that which is spiritual in nature, which is your purpose in life, your fertility, like your ability to create babies as well as other things, right? So your mother's bloodline is responsible for that, for what's happening at a spiritual level, what your purpose is, what your mission is, what you are giving birth to, and your gifts as well, also coming through and are visible more clearly from the mother's side, right? So that's how these energies they look within ourselves. So unfortunately, the original design in which we're designed as, which is the original law of gender, has been distorted, throughout our history as the human race. There's been a lot of things that have happened that have influenced how we engage with these energies, right? So the original design was that the masculine is here for protection, for leadership, for provision, for devotion to the children and to the feminine, right? That is how that energy moves in the world, how it was originally designed to move in the world, while the feminine is for nurturing, for creativity. There's also devotion with the feminine, devotion to the family, to the children, and so forth. What is the fourth frequency? Why am I forgetting this? It's slipping my mind. But that is what the feminine is more about, this more of an internal energy and exuding that. But what we're seeing right now in our world, what we're experiencing, even within ourselves, we are actually, for example, as genetic path cutters, responsible for our own provision. We have to create resources for ourselves right now. We have to protect ourselves in this world that we live in. We have to lead in our careers, in our businesses, in our lives. And the same is true for the men as well. They have to do this, right? So this original design that were created have since fallen into the point where now there's just a combination of these energies, and there is this war, internal war, that is happening within ourselves. When I think about like my journey with the masculine and the feminine energies, in the beginning, I was very much functioning and depending on like a lot of the masculine energy, right? So which looked like leadership, like taking care of every single thing, right? And this was very visible to me, particularly when I started working as a practitioner, where I wanted to take care of every single part of my journey. I created my website. I ran all the entrepreneurial ideas I've ever had primarily by myself, without looking for any help, without looking for any support. And so I just always believe it is my responsibility to take care of myself, and I have to do everything that I can to take care of myself. And difficulty with asking for help, when really actually the feminine thrives in community, in being supported by other people. So what I found in my journey is very quickly, like it did not take me a long time. 1 year into my business, I was completely burnt out. You know, I was just exhausted. I started having adrenal fatigue because I was overly depending on something that originally, my original design was not really created to always be providing and leading and protecting the self and taking care of business, you know, hashtag boss babe, essentially. And that's where this was also like where we got this empowerment to be on our boss babe energy, right? From the new age, those who are running their own businesses understand this concept of, back in the days, to hustle, hashtag hustle, it was like something to be excited about. I remember I used to write in my Twitter back in the days how I haven't slept in 24 hours because I was busy doing a project. And now I look back and I'm like, oh my God, I was just completely off there, you know. But we do that because we are in a trauma response, because most of us, we did not experience that provision, that leadership, that protection, that devotion from the masculine that was in our lives, you know. So that is our fathers, our grandfathers, you know. Even though I do come from a tribe, like the Galanga people are pretty, like the culture itself is very king-oriented energy. So there is a protection that comes through that lineage and that provision as well. But it's still distorted. There are distortions that comes with it. Mostly the distortion is that at this point, what I'm talking about sounds even crazy, that originally we were designed to function in these two different ways, that our energies, our human design is actually different. Our energies work differently because most people, we grew up, our mothers, fathers, all doing the same thing together at once, but particularly our mothers. You know, our mothers had to nurture, they had to take care of the home and provide and work and. And so for most of us, if the women in particular, we take on what our mothers used to do. We take care of business. We create the businesses. We are nurturing to every single person. We want to help everyone who wants to come through in the home, in the work, and right? So that's why we end up being burnt out, because we are not operating in our design. The beginning of my like a shift with how I understand my energy actually came when I started to study human design. I don't know if you guys know human design, and I learned that I am a generator, right? And my authority is the sacral, like, and which totally makes sense, because as a generator, we have a lot of energy. And this is why I always have outputs in the world where I can like do work in the world. But I have since started to move my business, and how I function to align it with this design. And one of the most fundamental things that changed everything with learning my design and wanting to work with this design from a feminine frequency without me trying to force things. So generators, for example, their prime directive is to respond, right? So is it to respond? Yes, it is to respond, right? So you receive an answer and you respond. We respond to the problems of the world. We respond to the problems, like to the questions people come in, then they ask us, right? So in the beginning, when I was in a distorted masculine energy where I felt like I am in a deficit and lack, and all I have to do is work as hard as I could, and then I will eventually get the results I needed. I was just doing whatever that I felt I needed to do. When I moved back and I took a step back and I started to look at, like, originally, who is Joy? How does she function? In what ways does she thrive, right? I did realize that I do have an excess energy. Like, I'm the type of person who could wake up early in the morning and work. However, I started to realize, but I have moments though where I completely shut down. So I'm not the type of person who can work from 8 in the morning until 5 p.m. That's not going to work for me. And so I started to shift my business such that I work in alignment with my peak periods, when my energy is in my feminine, when I'm ready to hold space for people, when I can be grounded, when I can answer, which is how I ended up starting my work like at 11 a.m. because in the morning, as a generator, who is a generator 2-4, which has the hermit energy to it, which means I am a hermit. I need to regenerate. So in the mornings, I have to kind of like go within. So I don't like talking at 8 a.m., 9, 10. That's when I start to wake up and I'm like, okay, I can talk to people. So I changed and shifted my work to fit this design. Yeah. Oh, 2-4 as well. Amazing, Evan. Yeah. So I shifted that and now I work at 11s and then I'm also very active in the evenings, hence why I do a lot of things in the evening. In the middle of the day, I'm not doing anything. Like from 2 to 5 p.m., I shut down. Like my body needs to rejuvenate because of that hermit energy. And if you know, the 4 is the networker, right? You have the gift to network with the different types of people. And that's how, by the way, Warriors of Light has come to be, or why it's easy for me to run this show, right? Because I just naturally know how to network. I know how to connect with people. I don't even know how I do it. I've just always known this. It has always just been in my energy, in my frequency, right? So I shifted to that level where I just made the decision that I will be in alignment with the energy, the original design that I am. And I want to function more from a feminine frequency, particularly also because the people that I work with are mostly feminine. They're women mostly, right? So if we're trying to run our work, our service in the world from that hustle, searching, overworking over and over, we are not only overwhelming the body, but spiritually, energetically, we are not going to yield the same result because some part of, especially if you're a genetic path cutter, the ancestors who are responsible for certain aspects of your life, you're not utilizing them properly, right? So when it does come to like things like money, pricing in our businesses, that is more of your masculine ancestors that are responsible for that, right? The provision. When now you are a genetic path cutter who holds space for people, you're working a lot with your grandmother energy. Of course, this is different with each person. You may actually have more of your ancestry coming from your father line, sure, your obokosi, your chieftaincy, essentially, from your father line. But generally, for most women, we do work with our grandmother energy, right? And so if you push and you're trying to create and work and you show up even in your work with your masculine ancestors, it's just you're creating this resistance, and it just will feel very hard. When I actually really did start to see a lot of changes and movement within how I'm in service, when I really aligned with my design, when I really looked into how to be more in my original energy as a feminine being, how to work more with my grandmothers, even though as a generator, I do have a more projected masculine energy than I guess most people, most designs, other designs, right? That's when things started to change, right? But really coming into union with these energies within myself required me to look more deeply into what needs to be healed, right? For me to function in the original design that I was created as, for me to feel comfortable and safe, for example, resting all day and not going into a panic attack. The first time I ever tried that, where I'm like, I'm not working, I'm going to rest. I grew up, my grandmother sitting under the trees for hours, and she just did not feel like there's something wrong with that. And for me, that was so strange. Like I could just sit here and not do anything. Like, really, is this allowed? You know? Yeah, I had a panic attack, and I had to do some work, some healing, to get to a point where it became my norm, right? So this is when I was introduced more deeply to the polarities of the masculine and the feminine, right? So I'm just going to go into that now. For most of us, we understand the polarities from a masculine perspective, right? Particularly because we have seen in the physical some of the outputs of those polarities. So there are two polarities in our world, right? And these polarities are essentially what we call light or dark, and dark, good or evil. Those are the two extremes that you can become, that you can align yourself with, right? And these polarities are very real, right? You can function from a positive frequency, a good frequency. You can also go to the extreme of the dark, or what we call evil as well, right? They are essentially at the core of it, good and bad, evil and light. They are all about the experience of the self in relationship to what we call source God. When we say something is good, we mean this is in alignment with the organic frequency of source God, right? The creator being, the creator source of all of life, all of consciousness. And when we say something is bad, we say that is this experience that is bad has moved further and further and further away from that which we know to be source God, to be creation energy, consciousness energy, right? And our world, the world that we live in, we experience these two frequencies. But in fact, in the recent history of the humankind, our human race, and this started to happen particularly in the root race, which we call the Lemuria. In Lemuria, this is when the frequency of that which is dark, that which is evil, started to really come to our planet and manifest in huge degrees, right? Another version of good and bad is organic and inorganic, or organic and artificial, or Christ and Antichrist, Sophia, anti-Sophia, right? And these two polarities, they exist in the feminine and in the masculine, because these are the only two energies that actually really do exist, although they can be a combination of the two, right? So that means that we have to come to deeper acceptance that there is a good, positive masculine and a dark, evil masculine, same as the feminine, right? There's a good, positive, as well as light, as well as the dark feminine that has been operating since Lemuria, since Atlantis, the fall of Atlantis, actually. In Lemuria, we were still in alignment with this. So we're talking about the last 20 million years or so, 25 million years or so, we have been experiencing these extreme experiences of the fall of the feminine and masculine energies, right? And there is a lot of literature into this that you can look into, right? I've come to understand that what we call our ancestral curses and spells, things, these patterns that are repeating in our bloodlines, right? That their origins are from this dark frequency that existed in our bloodline, right? So when we talk about a distortion or a darkness that is existing within you or within your bloodline, its origin is ancestral, right? It is that when we went through traumatic experiences in the last 25 million years, when our ancestors went through the slavery era, that was a dark event. That was what it is against the natural laws of this world. And the imprinting of that will mutate and move through the bloodline with the intention that they be healed, right? So let's look into how this looks like now from a dark, sort of from a perspective of the masculine. The good masculine is doing what we spoke about, the leadership, the provision, the protection, the taking care of the children and the women and the earth itself and the animals, all the kingdoms here. When the masculine starts doing the opposite of that, no longer providing, no longer leading in the home or leading in the earth in ways that is good for all, when the masculine is not protecting, meaning it becomes the perpetrator, we are looking at the dark masculine. That's the experience of the dark masculine. And the actual hyperdimensional forces, entities that are connected to that dark masculine, right? This frequency, when the masculine is particularly a perpetrator towards the feminine and other masculine, towards the children, towards the earth, towards everyone else, that frequency is what we call the Azazel energy. It's an Azazel spirit. Right? The Azazel spirit, when it functions within an individual, it creates the kind of individual who, because the whole idea is that when you're in the dark polarity, you have moved away from God, from your godly nature, from your divine energy. This means you are in lack of this divine energy. So for you to function, to continue to exist, you need to find ways to receive back that divine energy, right? And so the way to do that is to take from somewhere, and it's typically from other people, that divine energy. And this is what fundamentally the violence we see in the world at a spiritual level, that is what's happening. It's what we call a siphoning, where the dark masculine is siphoning the feminine frequency, which is the creation frequency, the source frequency, the Holy Mother energy, which is a very profound energy because it has the ability to create, right? And hence why women and children in this world have experienced a lot of violence coming from the masculine, not necessarily always, but we have seen this, right? So what's happening spiritually is that this dark masculine that is disconnected from source is siphoning from the women, right? So let's actually talk about how siphoning looks like, because there is in your face kind of siphoning, and let me know if something is coming up for you where, you know, we're talking about men who, this is what I always see in my sessions, our fathers who, and our uncles who were abusive physically, sexually towards the girl child or the boy child in the family, right? What we're interacting with is an Azazel spirit. It's a disconnected, dark, masculine spirit that is draining, and particularly it will often target the children, because the children are often holding still a lot of the divine energy. They have not yet disconnected through programming and the conditioning of the world, hence why we see and experience a lot of trauma in our childhood, right? Because there's a spirit specifically targets that. In Africa, this is a really big problem. It's hidden, but it's very real, right? So when we are seeing this with our brothers, our uncles, our fathers, that's what is happening there spiritually. It's an Azazel attack on the feminine, on the innocence that is alive within us, right? The Azazel spirit can also, obviously, it's not always in a huge, like, violent degree like that, but before I understood the Azazel spirit, this was my experiences growing up, particularly with both men and women, but I want to start with the men first. I would find that a lot of men gravitated towards me, right? And they initially would gravitate towards me from like a romantic lens, and then soon enough, once they tap into like the wisdom that I carry, it will move to like friendships, and I did not know it then, but I will spend a lot of time like basically teaching, coaching these men, like really supporting them to become the best version of themselves. And I have no regret about that. But I have later come to understand like what would typically happen every time I'll spend time with some men, not all of them. I'll go back home with a horrible headache. I'll feel so drained. Like I would just be sick, and I will not understand why this will happen to me all the time. Like, why do I always get sick when I spend some time, like a long period of time with someone, And I then started to understand what was happening is what we call a siphoning, right? Where, because as a feminine, we are always exuding this frequency of the Holy Mother, the divine feminine. There are those who, if they're not in touch with their own inner masculine energies, they're not able to generate frequency within themselves, regulate their nervous system. They, through what we call vampirism or parasitism, they create hooks, cords with women that are intimate with women that they have a deep connection with, and then they drain them. And this is sometimes happening consciously and unconsciously, right? And that's where the headaches comes from. That's where being drained comes from, right? So that's also another level of how the Azazel spirit of the dark masculine functions, right? So I work a lot with the feminine genetic path cutters, oracles, shamans, because you are connected to the spirit realm. You were born without a veil. You often become a target for this kind of siphoning, right? And so that's why we have to like build bigger shields and become aware that sometimes people gravitate towards us, particularly because they get regenerated by the Sophia energy you are exuding, right? And that's what creates drainage. If you feel drained, sometimes illnesses that you have come from this draining, this siphoning, right? And like I said, it's not that everyone is consciously doing this, but there are those who are consciously doing this, or it's just, it's something that they've been doing as consciousness for some time, right? Does that make sense? Let me take a breath. All right, so as oracles, we have to like disconnect cords and hooks with certain people, right? If you have been in an intimate relationship with a person, you automatically have a cord that connects you to them, right? And some cords, most cords actually that we have with people have been existing throughout many lifetimes that we've interacted with these people. And most of us, most of the people we meet are already people we have already met in other timelines, in other past lifetimes, right? So having that cord is what makes you feel a resonance with someone, right? But that doesn't always mean that resonance is organically healthy, was the original design. It may have that distortion, and that's when we begin to experience the siphoning, because the connection we have with this person is inorganic, right? And that's also mostly because when you do your own healing, you activate more of your eternal light, your organic energy, right? Which is blinding, which is beautiful, but which also magnetizes different energies to you. So we have to become aware that what I'm talking about, like if there's a resistance within you, it's like, oh my God, no, Joy, that's not true. And it is true, right? It's the truth that we have been neglecting to see or choosing not to see, right? So for me, I had to come to a deep understanding of like that there are siphoning energies that happen in my life, particularly with the masculine. But how to heal that? The first step I had to come or to begin with is to understand this. If there is any spiritual experience that you are going through, that spiritual experience, most of the time, it is an overlay. It's something that is happening because there is already something existing within your field that is drawing or magnetizing that experience in. This does not mean it's your fault, right? This is not what I'm saying. But we call in, magnetize specific experiences because there is something in your field. So for me, I had to look at one. The first thing you look at is your childhood experiences, right? So what is your childhood experience with the masculine? That was a question I asked myself, right? So for me, while I had a father figure in my life, my father is Kalanga, which is a different tribe. They speak a different language from the Setswana language, which is the common language in my country. And because I didn't grow up in the village, I never learned Kalanga, right? So this was a big aha for me. So every time when we will visit, which was always on Christmas holidays, we'll visit the home village, my sister and I could not speak the language. So most of the time we were always like these two aliens who are there, and people are often obviously communicating in the native language, Kalanga. And then sometimes my cousins will try to put us and get us involved or explain to us what's happening. But majority of the time, it was a lot of like just me and my little sister just talking with each other or observing, or it's just we got so accustomed to it because it was something that happened from our childhood, right? So as time went on, I realized that experience of belonging and my original masculine bloodline, masculine father lineage, not being able to understand them created obviously an imprint, a disconnection, it's a disconnection essentially. It created what we call a leak in my light body, right? That I have to work so hard with the masculine because my father was also not so strong in the Setswana language. He was more able to speak in his language than the language of my mother and most of my mother's language, right, which is the language we learned. So that means that there was difficulty already connecting with the masculine. I was not able to express myself fully with my father because of this language barrier originally, right? And so as I grew up, I did not know that I was working from a trauma response, I always felt like I need to do so much to explain myself to the masculine, to show them, to like get them to talk to me, to hear my side of the story. And that is what created what we call the matter wound, like what created me always creating experiences where most of the men that were magnetized in my life, I spent a lot of time explaining myself, breaking down things for them, teaching them certain things, right? Essentially, what was happening was their father wound. The origin of magnetizing this dark masculine to my frequency was my father wound, right? And so for me to heal how I relate with the masculine in a healthy way, I needed to heal my father wound. There is obviously so much more to the father wound, but this is just the one example that really took me some time to really even understand that the fact that I couldn't speak my father's language was actually a big deal to my child, my inner child, right? And I had to work through that so many times, yeah, to arrive to the understanding that I don't always have to work so hard to communicate, that it's safe to let go of the need to always communicate. And once this landed, which took some time, it didn't happen in 1 year, 3 years, maybe consciously. That's when I started to see a shift with how I relate with the masculine, which is now I am no longer feeling like I have to save the masculine. I have to do so much for the masculine, right? And this is what's returning me to my organic feminine energy, which is that the feminine energy is actually a receptor, like it receives. You are like, we don't have to go and hunt and get people to become our friends and get them to stay through being available all the time, right? So that's the beginning. The beginning essentially is that you have to identify what within you is creating a doorway for your experience with the dark masculine, your experience with where the masculine is not functioning in its highest positive original design, right? So it is the fundamental truth for every single thing. Everything does return us to the original wounds, which is the mother wound and father wound, right? Because honestly, it is our relationship with our mother and father that have skewed our experiences in the world, right? So that was the first thing. The second thing is understanding that every single man that has ever come into my life, they already had a connection with my soul, right? They already had a connection prior, right? And so what I found was that some people were from my past lives. Some people came into my life because we used to have, I was married to them in another lifetime. They were my brother in another lifetime. They were my best friend in another lifetime. We were soldiers together. We were mentor and student. All the different stories we have played them out. So when someone comes into your life and there is that energy of that dark masculine, I mean, the tendency is to go into panic and into projecting out and blaming the other person, but we have to take responsibility as well by understanding the fundamental truth of how we relate with each other. So what is that fundamental truth? Every single energy, every single person, which is also energy, that gravitate towards you, it has an origin that goes beyond this lifetime. So you are listening to me, probably not for the first time. You may have listened to me in another lifetime, right? So we are drawn to specific people because we have already coexisting chords, frequencies that we are here to either continue to amplify if they're good, or to heal if they are karmic, if they are in the negative, right? This liberated me. I used to be so angry about all of these men. I was like, oh my God, that man took so much from me. That was like victimhood, right? Which is one of the issues that the feminine has as well, right? But once we can accept that the experiences that we've experienced with other people, maybe what we do call, one moment. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So understanding that we already have coexisting experiences and that there are certain people who we are on a karmic journey with, as in like there are energies that we are coming together to resolve, even if those energies are bad. And this does not mean that we don't get to say this person did this violent thing to me. We say that, we honor that, we call the cops, I am that type of person, we put them in jail. But for our liberation, for our healing, for us to step into union, we have to understand what is happening fundamentally, spiritually. If we don't understand that, what's going to happen is that this connection with this person who maybe, for example, like I said, from ever since I was 19, I always called the same man into my life who was emotionally unavailable, who was perceived me as the teacher and greatly benefited from my teaching, my support in their life. But the energy was not reciprocal, right? So this happened the first time, the second time, and the third time, fourth time. And that's when I'm like, there is something here. What is this pattern, right? So it's not about just like bringing justice to one person. It's about observing and noticing if there is a pattern and realizing the pattern, the denominator is you. So it means you are holding something in your field that needs to be resolved for this pattern to stop. It will not be stopped only by taking the person out of your life, cancel culture, right? There are times where we can do that if we were in an unsafe situation, but we take responsibility by asking what within my field, whether that's a childhood wound, soul wound, an ancestral wound that is calling this pattern in, and understand that's your assignment, right? And so then you can heal it. Yeah. You can heal it through finally identifying what is calling this pattern and then healing it within yourself. Yeah. I'm getting distracted because there's a lot of noise in the home. But yes, yeah, so that's the second thing. You have to identify the pattern and unplug the thing that is creating the pattern. It is in you. It's not in you per se, but it's in your energy field, and you have to identify what that is, right? And then the third thing is the ancestral wounding, right? When we're genetic path cutter, we carry energy, our ancestral energies, right? So it's not surprising to me that I'm not the first woman in my bloodline. In fact, my mother is this way, my grandmother is this way. A lot of my cousins are these ways, great-grandmothers were this way, which is this energy of taking care of everyone, right? So because I inherited this, we inherit the DNA of our mother, we inherit also the information of expression. So the information of expression for me, for example, was to be the caretaker, to take care of people, right? So in my family, there are a lot of both teachers and healers, particularly the women. So any distortions that I have, like for example, the example I gave, feeling the need to take care of the men in my life, also came ancestrally, and they were part of it, which is originally the organic way I am. I am a caretaker. I can't ever stop caring for people. However, there are levels in which it's too much. It is not coming from a healthy state, a point. It is the pain of my grandmother's alive in me, and I'm repeating it, and I have to notice it and then make new choices. Right? So essentially, we heal by identifying the inner child wound, the soul wounding, and the ancestral wounding. When you're a genetic path cutter, when we talk about like my ancestors' wildest dream, it is essentially that you are here to be the pattern disruptor, right? What is a pattern disruptor? It is the person who recognizes ancestral patterns, things that have been repeating in your family. And it's particularly most of the time around this relationship with the masculine and the feminine. A lot of our issues in the world are about the masculine and the feminine, right? It's about, even if we're talking about money, that's a masculine energy thing. If we're talking about the children, fertility, marriage, it's all around these two energy, right? So we inherit the patterns from our masculine lineage and feminine lineage, and we are here to heal them, to transmute them. And the way to transmute them, what I've been seeing is that like people think, okay, I need to go do an inner child retrieval or a soul retrieval or an ancestral retrieval, or I go through like a cleanse, I go to the mountain and I get cleansed on these ancestral energies. And 100%, this is true. You should do that. However, you have to understand that these energies are also in the mind, in the body, not just in the spirit. So a lot of the healing is happening spiritually, but then it's also your responsibility to change these at a mental level, right? At a body level, right? So being a pattern disruptor literally means you have to make a new choice. That for most people looks like, which is very terrifying. Sometimes that looks like leaving that relationship where there were dark energy frequencies existing, leaving spaces, careers, cities, towns, because if you don't, the energy will come through. That also requires a boundaries, right? Saying no. Genetic path cutters, we struggle with working with our masculine and feminine energy, particularly with creating barriers. And so we are the group that's likely to avail ourselves for people to come whenever they want, to call in, to have sessions whenever they want. And we feel like it's our duty to take care of them. That is not actually healthy and supportive of the true feminine energy or your masculine energy, that you are holding that more, right? We have to get to a point where we do recognize that we are just like doctors who you have to book an appointment to go to. We have to work in alignment with our design. We have to allow people to respect our boundaries, right? We have to resurrect these boundaries. And where we struggle the most actually is not always with strangers, it's with family, it's with people around us, right? Where we feel we have to avail ourselves every time there's a crisis, every time someone needs support, I have to avail myself. That's what love is, which is a distortion, right? Sometimes for our ancestral healing, it's very difficult to understand, but sometimes we have to allow people to pick themselves up, to take care of themselves, because if we don't, we are literally clipping the ability to open their wings and fly, because we carry them all the time, So that is how we heal, Yes. Okay, let me take a breath. I want to talk a little bit about the dark feminine, because I spoke about the masculine. Okay, let me know if you have any questions so far. Or you can raise your hand if you want to call in. Okay, so the dark masculine is easy to see, but the dark feminine has been historically connected to what we call the Lilith Spirit, right? It's not a one-way street, you know, like these names, Azazel and Lilith. They are just the embodiment of something, but it doesn't always mean that is what they are truly, right? So the Lilith frequency within the feminine, the way that it functions is, I always see this because I work with women. This frequency of the seductress, right? Women, as women, we have this tendency to want to seduce, manipulate men, even women, right? To do our bidding using our sexual energies, right? And that we call that the seductress archetype. It's a fallen archetype because it's manipulative in nature, right? So it's either we're using our sexual energy through, you know, that sensuality, being sensual. And I mean, the archetype of the seductress has been put in so many movies. You may remember or recall, if you're a woman, when you have used this feminine frequency, this dark feminine frequency of seducing and manipulating men to do your bidding, right? This frequency itself, it's, while the masculine siphons, the feminine has this thing of like a takeover, like control, like shifting things to our own desires and bidding. I mean, the same can happen with the masculine, but this dark frequency, it's so subtle that you can even miss that you are functioning from a fallen consciousness that is not the original design of who you are, right? So the seductress is the part of us that, you know, can strategically come up with ways on how to get the guy that I like, okay? If he likes this, I'm gonna also pretend I like these things. I'm gonna talk to him a certain way. Like basically the games we play during dating, they have a lot of that seductress energy archetype, right? Where we pretend to be someone that we are not. We use our sexual energy. We create this idea of who we are for this man or woman. And then once we get them, then our true self comes out and the man is shocked and like, what's happening? Who are you? I thought you were this, you know, only loving person. What's happening? And that's because we were not in our original energy, right? This seductress is literally Instagram, right? It is the epitome of coaching, the coaching industry, right? We use our images, our sexy images to call in people to, you know, even you may find that you gravitate to people who look good, seductive in this, you know, frequency, because we associate that frequency with, I mean, essentially we are using our sexual energy, and sexual energy is creative energy. So it is magnetic, right? Yeah, it is magnetic. So yeah, definitely. So we have to look within if we are functioning with the seductress archetype, because fundamentally though, it is a false identity. And that's what ends up leading to men feeling like they were lied to. You're not, you know, women be crazy comes from that, where you pretended to be someone else in the beginning, being the seductress, and then changing finally once you've gotten the person, and then your true self comes out, which is that essentially most of us, we are in amalgamations, I don't know if I'm saying that word correctly, but of the different energies. Like, so we have wounds within ourselves, we have parts that need work, and so that later comes out, and then it feels like we duped the men, we manipulated them, we lied to them. The same is true with, even from a business perspective or a service perspective, a lot of people are seduced by images, by, like, I see, and I work with people who gravitate towards particular healers who look good, who everything looks so perfect, you know, and so because it looks perfect, then it must mean the value is higher. And then a person experiences that and they're like, it's not the thing I actually wanted, the depth is not at the level I wanted, right? So it's that performative energy, and we do that a lot as women. Of course, this is because of our training, but that's Lilith. That's a Lilith energy. That's the spirit of Lilith. Lilith is a magician. She gives you an illusion, and then after you are enthralled, she shows you who you are. You think you thought you were in a mansion, all along is a dark alley. And then she will show it to you, and then you freak out. You're like, I thought it was a mansion. Yeah. So that's the seductress frequency. Another way that our Lilith spirit comes through, the dark feminine, you wouldn't even think it's a dark feminine, but it's the origin of it is actually this princess Disney movies, right? Of the helpless maiden who needs to be saved, right? So we create this helplessness and this hysteria, right? And even at the COVID, essentially the way that the dark feminine likes to work, our energy, while for the men it's still about control, but it's about a projected violence, taking like, this is mine. For the female, it's still the same thing, control, but manipulation at the core of it. So when we're in our princess energy, we are creating the I am helpless victim, please help me, save me, right? And it can also come through what my friend Nono Faliga calls the good girl template, right? Like, I am a good girl, I am like good and great all the time, right? And that's denying that you are a multidimensional being with extreme range of being and expression. So the Disney frequency is that it's still about manipulating people to think you are something that you are not. And later on, with that frequency, it builds resentment when you, after all that you do, all that helplessness, all that goodness, there's no reciprocity. And so you go into a state of panic or resentment. And your relationship with other people is distorted in that way, right? So that is the dark feminine. We need to recognize this within ourselves when we are acting within these extremes, right? Once we can recognize that a lot of the dark feminine, dark masculine, there is a deeper history to it, really. But when we can identify this within ourselves and then begin the work of asking, what is the origin of this? Like, when did I start? Where did I get this imprint? Is it my childhood? Is it a soul thing? Is it an ancestral thing? Then we begin to heal these energies, right? But a lot of it has to do with doing this difficult thing of being honest with yourself that I function from this. I am using this to do this to get what I want, right? So to be in union, it is our mission to get in union with the original energies. And to get in union, it's to, first of all, embody the original design that you are in, right? And if you're a feminine being, embodying that, moving more to your devotional frequency, to your nurturing frequencies, and so on, but being aware and discerning of the hooks that come in from the dark masculine and the dark feminine, that exist within you because you are a combination of your mother and your father's energy. And so they are alive within you, right? And so coming into union is accepting that you have been influenced by these energies. And even at a spiritual level, our origins come from these two energies, and we have to look into how we relate with the masculine, how we relate with the feminine, where there is a falsehood, a manipulative energy existing, and healing that. And the more we heal that, the thing about like healing or being in union, a lot of it is not something that you are actually responsible for. Healing, union comes through divine grace. When you focus on actually removing all the obstructions that stop you from being in your original design, you will just organically come into union, right? You organically know how to, yes, because for most of us, we do have to provide for ourselves right now, how to do that in ways that is in alignment with your energy, right? And it's a process, of course, it's a process, but one of the questions that the warriors was asking was, how does that look like? How does healing and being in union look like? It looks like coming to a greater acceptance that this world runs on these two energy, masculine and feminine energy. And these two energies, they influence different aspects of your life, your money, your relationships, your marriage, your career, as a genetic path cutter or whatever career you are in. These are influenced by your relationship with this energy, right? And once you can accept that, then you take the physical choice. So it has to be something, it's a choice, not a mental thing, to move what needs to be moved for you to be in union. So for example, yes, we are meant to, as the feminine, to create from rest, from grace, from our prayer and connection with the spirit realm. This comes very naturally for us, right? But because we live in the 21st century, we do have to understand that if, for example, if we are manifesting anything, we require the practice of the masculine, which is taking action, which is a masculine task, a masculine frequency, right? So for example, in your business, in your service in the world, if you're a genetic path cutter practitioner, this idea of, if I just pray on it, if my ancestors will bring me the thing that I've prayed for, it's true, but not fully true, because you still require to take the action, of course, of sharing with people what the service is, doing sales and marketing, just like most modern humans do now, right? That will be what we call a masculine energy, using your masculine energy, like the sharing and telling people about your ideas and your work and your seeds, right? That is what coming into union looks like. But for whichever energy you are, we do have to use our original design. So if you are a feminine being, you have to use your feminine frequency and build your life from this frequency. It will look different from the men. That's why women can't run their businesses exactly the way men do. Men are able to like wake up at 6 and do all the work all day and literally not get exhausted. That's not what the design of the feminine is. The design of the feminine has a lot with receiving, creating space for receiving. So you have to move into that. And at the same time, create the boundaries you need to create around the already existing energies that may be siphoning and manipulative in nature. Right. So that is how it looks like to be in union, right? To be in union, it's something that you wake up one day and you realize you are. It's not something that has a how to, because what we're talking about with the inner union, we're actually talking about a feminine event, which is a feminine event that happens through what we call the Holy Spirit, which is the Holy Mother energy, right? The Holy Mother, once you have completed what you need to complete in terms of initiation, will bestow you with divine grace. And one day you wake up and your life is the thing you've been dreaming and trying to work for a long time. And all of it didn't require you to do anything, but to return to your original design. Yes. So that's it with the inner union. I hope that this clarified a lot for you. Let me know. Yes, Efe, thank you for joining in. I hope, yeah, you received what you needed to receive, and you don't have any last questions. But if you do, let me know. Thank you, FM. This has been clarifying and enlightening. I am happy you were here with me and you received what you needed to receive. Yes. So this is it. This is the end of today's class. Transmission. We're going to have, like I mentioned in the beginning, 2 more. We will have a guest the next week, and the last episode will be a review of the season. I invite you to come through. I'm hoping that we can make it a community call, so you can join me live if you want, or you can put your video off, but we can have a conversation. So I hope to see you in the last 2 episodes as well. Yeah, okay. Have a good day.